Patricia, hi there. Now, given this was a rare address to the nation, usually reserved for times of crisis, was it warranted because what was in the speech had already been said before?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable point, and it's a critique already being made of the Prime Minister's speech. It's a critique you'll hear from the opposition. I have written a column, it's just gone on ABC News online, where Tony Barry, who's a Redbridge director, strategist once for the Liberal Party, but is in a bipartisan firm now, he says that, you know, this could have been an Instagram reel. That was his analysis, that it won't necessarily cut through. So that's one view. The other view, though, and I think it has some merit, whatever people think of the address, I think we are in an unprecedented crisis. We have not seen a crisis like this since the 1970s and have been told by all the experts that this is worse. So when there is a national crisis, you expect your leaders to step up and to directly communicate with Australians. Now, it's a very old-fashioned way of communicating. Of course, the video's already gone online, so people will probably see it there, probably more likely. But the idea of directly communicating with Australians, not through the conduit of the media or a journalist, but actually eyeballing Australians through the barrel of a camera and talking about what the crisis means for Australia, what the government has done and is prepared to do, and also, crucially, because that's really if you're looking for what was the news in this address, well, the news was what the Prime Minister is now asking of us, Girish. And that is different, and that is a step up, and I think it's significant.
Yeah, so would it have, and you mentioned this before, have this keep calm and carry on effect until he was mentioning, April to May, where we will feel a bigger pinch from this, but also at the same time today we are visibly seeing that prices at the pump going down.
Yeah, so what he's telling us is that over the months ahead, not weeks, not days as we'd love, but months ahead, things are going to be very tough and bleak. He's being pretty upfront about that. And what he's telling Australians in this address is that he has Australians back, that the government will throw everything at this crisis to try and inoculate us as much as possible from what is a huge economic shock. But equally, he's saying they can't do it all. They can't fix this crisis for us, for me and you and our viewers. There is no way any single government in a globalised economy can do that. So he's sending the message by telling us all of the measures he's got and then talking about what we still need to do. What I thought was important in this speech was warning us about the economy over the next few months. I think that was the Prime Minister preparing us for what are going to be really, really difficult times. And I don't like to be too bleak, but I think most Australians know just how tough this is going to get. It's going to get the toughest, Girish, in May, not now. If you're stressed now, really just prepare, because it will ratchet up. So that's what he's getting us prepared for. And I thought the message on the way we should behave in the weeks to come was really quite significant. This is the first time I think the Prime Minister has said to voters directly that he would like them, and he's trying to appeal to our best sides, would like them to think about alternative forms of transport. So get on public transport, avoid driving if you can. But he is using this voluntary approach, and we knew that when he went into National Cabinet at the beginning of the week. The government and governments at state and territory level have been doing everything they can to avoid a top-heavy approach which tells us what to do. There's a few reasons for that. One of them is that they don't want to, because they know people don't like being told what to do. I'm sure you don't like being told what to do. I hate it. So I absolutely get that. It's also trying to read the mood of the nation. COVID was not that long ago in some of our memories. Many of us are still dealing with the sort of emotional and economic consequences of that period. And so the government has made an estimation that even if it was to want to be draconian, I don't think it does want to be, but even if it was to want to do that, it won't work, because people are, there's a real anti-authoritarian sentiment, I think, that's grown in the community. So he's appealing to you to try not to use fuel if you can avoid it over the coming weeks, so that it can be used, whatever fuel we're able to get into our country, and we are trying, we're spending kind of a lot of money underwriting fuel coming into the country at record high prices, that we use that fuel for agriculture, food production, for our supply chains as a priority, and for regional communities, people who don't have the choice. They don't have, like you and I do when we live in Melbourne, to get on a tram or a train. So he's trying to appeal to our best side. And that's the strategy the government wants to use. And the PM is using the approach of directly communicating with voters as a way of really escalating the request to the public to try and do what's best and in the best national interest, which is to make sure the fuel that we do have, we can use for as long as possible.
And of course, this is within the confines of the Canberra bubble. I do wonder, has gained the most political traction here. And I'm only asking because the opposition had asked for that fuel excise to be cut before the Prime Minister made the announcement.
Look, my view on this sort of stuff is that when there's a big national crisis, the best way for any opposition to handle it is to really let the government not get in the way, let the government do what governments do. And if governments stuff up, guess what? Voters are pretty smart and they mark them down. Yes, the opposition called for the fuel excise cut. It was only a few days before the government did it, and there's no doubt that they went first with that. And yes, that is a political win, if you like. But equally, while the opposition should be absolutely scrutinising all of the measures that the government unveils, Australians are at a particularly nervous point. And if you overreach, if you're too political, if you're too sniping, if you're too negative, Australians will also mark you down. This is the way politics works. Now, in the COVID crisis, sometimes Anthony Albanese as opposition leader, and I remember it well, he was really smart and strategic in not entering every debate and letting Scott Morrison manage that. And of course, we know that didn't necessarily go well at some points for Scott Morrison, famously around vaccines and his comment that it wasn't a race to get vaccines into the country. The Prime Minister, I think, tonight it was clear, is aware of some of the criticisms that he sometimes is too slow to act at the beginning of things. And even with this crisis, I think the government, I know they were privately working on some things, but I don't think they met the mood early on in terms of the urgency of this crisis. Australians could see there was a war. They could see there was an impact on our supply. And there was a shock as a result, and they wanted to hear the government take that seriously. Well, now he's taking it very seriously. He's throwing everything at it, and I've got messages here from, key people in the opposition who say, while they will critique the government, and they should when the government does the wrong thing, they need to tread carefully as well, because ultimately what do normal people want? They want the government to try and do the best job they can, because if they don't, normal people suffer. And so there is a really nervous sort of sense around Canberra as well about how to get this right, how not to overreact, but equally, Girish, not to underreact, because at the start it looked like an underreaction. Now it's about going, we are going to be careful, we are going to make requests of the Australian public, take people with you, but not tell them what to do in a top-heavy COVID-style way.
Yes, and just finally, PK, I just wanted to pick out one thing that I thought was quite interesting in the Prime Minister's address there, in that he was saying that Aussies are paying for a war that Australia is not taking part in. Does that inform us more about what Labor and the government thinks about how the US is handling the war with Iran, the very thing that triggered this energy crisis?
Well, you know how much I like you, because that is a very good and smart question. It was a bit coded, and you were right to pick it up. The name I didn't hear in this address was Donald Trump, who is, of course, the man responsible for the upheaval we've seen in the world economy that is smashing the economies of his allies, right? Now, I'm not making any point about the merits of the original action, but the consequences are dire, and clearly allies are concerned. Now, Anthony Albanese has been careful and measured not to be gratuitous in his criticism of Donald Trump, but equally, you're right, in the speech, in the address to the public, he was trying to make it clear and create some distance between him and his government and the Trump administration in relation to this war. And I read that too, although not directly blaming Donald Trump or using his name in the speech as well. Look, the Australian government might like to tell us they're not involved, but truthfully, we are involved in a defensive role. We did, of course, send assets, and we are part of the defensive role to ensure that the UAE and the Gulf states are able to be somewhat protected in this escalation. However, there has been a reluctance, and I think will continue to be a reluctance from the Albanese government to go any further. However, the Straits of Hormuz are obviously a key area for us to open up. We all need the Strait of Hormuz to open up for us to get more supply into our country. And so watch that space over the next few weeks, how that unfolds. Tomorrow, Donald Trump will address his nation as well. Hopefully we'll get some clearer outline about what his intentions are. There was lots of speculation today about whether there would be a ground offensive in Iran from the US. We don't know is the truth. We'll find out, hopefully, if Donald Trump is able to outline what that looks like. But Australia is really at the whim of the behaviour of administrations and countries that we have no control over. So all we can do is control the way we respond. And I thought that was the clearest message from the Prime Minister. He's focusing on our response because we can't control what's going on in the Middle East.
Okay, on to what Donald Trump is going to say tomorrow. Patricia Karvelas, really appreciate your analysis from Canberra. Thank you so much.
Thanks.